Ivy here. This week's podcast is entitled Psychological Warfare Across Borders. Introduction. The meaning of psychological warfare. This week's podcast explores the ramifications of psychological warfare and its application in the modern era, to be delivered across borders. I have a particular interest in psychology, and I am a chartered professional in various forms of human behaviour and the rationale behind it in some of the manifestations. The title for this podcast comes from a very interesting book by Neil Morton called Psychological Warfare. It covers a topic I am deeply interested in, and it forms a very useful backdrop to its application in terms of the various forms of delivery used by the British royal family and its partners in the media, both printed and televised, and in all the societal groups I have mentioned many times before, who all support each other in order to ensure that they all continue to benefit from a pattern of life that has existed for centuries. In this podcast, I will quote extracts from Neil Morton's book here and there, but I would recommend that you read the book for yourselves if you have an interest in this area of human behaviour and the manipulation of emotions and actions, i.e. propaganda techniques, which we have also covered previously in at least 2 podcasts. I will read extracts from the book explaining what psychological warfare actually is and how it is formally explained in the book. I will then go on to discuss the area of abuse termed as coercive control and how it links to this podcast topic. I will outline how and where coercive control as a form of abuse sits within the law, and how there are countries and states adding this area into their legislature processes. I will give some indicators of what coercive control is and is not. When all those areas above have been covered, I will, in my usual style, try to map treatment of Meghan and or Harry, or both, by the British royal family and media organisations in particular, using actual types of behaviour and how it was delivered and the eventual outcomes of each. And then I will underscore each one of those examples with the area of the law that has been breached. Even if I can't cover every example in the podcast, it will be covered in the article because it is currently running at 22 pages, 22 A4 pages of pure text, let alone the images as well. So hopefully you will find something in there that you all enjoy. Ultimately, this podcast and the article will provide examples which prove how all of the above has fed into the online community, not least because it can reach more people in one go than any other medium, and in so doing makes it a valuable and useful tool for abusers and abusive organisations and groups to conduct abusive activity from one part of the world to a target or targets based in a completely different country and in some cases on a different continent. International law advocates and senior professionals in this field need to factor this into actions against delivery. Methods used in this way to adults as well as to children. The abusers are able to play cyber warfare by manipulating the minds of millions who have access to the information being put out to the masses, to manipulate mindsets and in so doing change points of view. It can lead to the build-up of making someone more popular than if none of this manipulation had been attempted, and likewise it can cause vast numbers to begin to harbour resentment against a person or group based on the drip impact of a type of rhetoric which appears in increasing frequency in printed and televised media, and where some of the phrases used are repeated by a few people in those societal groups mentioned previously. And before very long, social media is swamped by hordes of people supporting the same messages, targeting the same people, and whose accounts are often days old. Both sides of this coin of delivering two messages based on the target of the love or hate are very dangerous indeed. Whatever the outcome, as the activity increases in the type of delivery and scale of the action, those who devise the warfare are never at the front line, and the people who have fallen for the hype at all stages of the hierarchy of hate models we have also covered previously are collateral damage. They are doing what was intended from the start, and they all believe with a passion that they have found their niche and what they are doing will lead to a better world, knowing that their target of choice is indeed a bad person and will not be missed, and at worst, even if they still exist, they will be broken psychologically, and in the eyes of those who form the collateral damage groups, their purpose will have been achieved. Another person who has been taken down a peg or two in their eyes only will no longer outshine the chosen ones, chosen by those who devised the warfare in the first place, but who can stand there with their hand behind their backs, looking innocent and representing their nation like good figureheads are there to do. And most of the population will be focused on the next target in the population, to give them relevance again, to get up each morning and to talk tactics with their peers. And it returns to game on again. That is what modern society has become in increasing areas, and decent people need to wake up and recognise that they are controlled pawns in a much wider game, and should consider how they would feel if they or their peer group suddenly became the chosen prey for the next few years or decade. Would it still be easy to get up each morning and face the day? What exactly is psychological warfare? Political warfare, hearts and minds, a propaganda to name a few. While most people are aware of the emergence of psychological war, it can be traced back as far as mankind itself. Psychological warfare is the use of non-combat techniques to mislead and intimidate opponents and influence their psychological makeup. The techniques employed are designed to target thoughts, emotions and attitudes with propaganda and threats to influence a person's actions. Propaganda is not a threatening concept when used alone. Daniel Lerner wrote about the theory of black, white and grey propaganda in his 1949 book, Psychological Warfare Against Germany, D-Day to VE Day. Let's look at white propaganda. This defines a use of truthful information with a moderate bias to influence opponents in the Second World War. This included millions of leaflets being dropped from planes over friendly and enemy territory. The leaflet stated their source and contained information designed to encourage support and contributions from the targeted audience. As great propaganda, this will often be anonymous and contain information that is mainly true. If there are untrue statements, it is unlikely that they can be disproven. It involves presenting legitimate arguments that are free from agenda but have undefined sources. And then there's black propaganda. Put simply, that's fake news. This type of propaganda can contain both true and false statements, but it will appear to be legitimately sourced. This type of propaganda is designed to be wholly believable and is distributed with the intent of subversion. The difference between grey and black propaganda is often a very fine line. The most effective form of black propaganda is formed to look like it has come from trusted sources. Often the biggest giveaway is any links to grey propaganda that are less convincing. There are many different forms of psychological warfare, but the result is just the same. The tactics employed or designed to demoralise, influence beliefs, change motives, and stir emotions. The targets of these tactics can range from the man on the street to the highest form of government, with everyone in between included. Simple forms of word of mouth, face-to-face communication may seem to be trustworthy, but it can be affected by rumours and mistruths. Entertainment media sources. We may feel that television and film are purely used for entertainment, but we can be influenced by them without even knowing it. Subtle messages and information can be presented in a way that seems like harmless fun. But it can be an effective way of altering people's thoughts and beliefs. Audio media. If you listen to the radio, you will already be aware of the power of sound. Gentle background noise can filter through and register quite easily, even though you may be concentrating on other things. Your brain is hardwired to register silent visual media. Leaflets, newspapers and magazines may seem old-fashioned today, but they still play a role. They use visual images to appeal to our base instincts and influence our thoughts. Online sources, of course, the internet and online influences cannot be ignored. As we spend more time looking at screens, the chance to influence our thoughts increases. Understanding psychological warfare means understanding its role in battle. The quintessential arena for enemies and conflict, typical tactics of printed leaflets. Using printed leaflets to suggest the enemy should withdraw from the battlefield, distribution is simple. The future of psychological operational techniques is unpredictable. It would be an understatement to say that we will see a significant change in the future. The only thing certain about the future of this type of mind control is that it will be different than what we are used to today. The application of the theory. Psychological warfare is a form of psychological manipulation that uses non-violent means to demoralize and subdue the enemy. It is often associated with political campaigns, but can also be seen in military strategy. The goal of a psychological warfare campaign is to weaken the morale of the target group so that they are less likely to want to fight or resist. Psychological warfare can take many forms, including spreading propaganda and misinformation, destroying property, attacking infrastructure, or disrupting communications. Psychological warfare tactics are used worldwide by different governments and organisations to influence the thoughts and emotions of a target audience. The goal is to change the perception of a person or group and alter their behaviour in favour of an idea, cause or organisation. This is done by using propaganda techniques such as spreading rumours about threats, attacking the enemy's identity, values and traditions. In today's world, with social media being an integral part of our lives, it has become easier for people to be influenced by these tactics. They have access to different points of view on any topic, which can lead to confusion and uncertainty about what is true or false information. Psychological warfare is the use of various techniques to undermine an opponent's mental state, and is often used to create a general sense of fear or panic in the population. Psychological warfare tactics are used worldwide by different governments and organisations to influence the thoughts and emotions of a target audience. Examples of subversive activity and their application to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. UK tabloids and British royal family perspective of the end justifying the means, i.e. the psychological game to be played. Persuade the UK nation to be against the Sussexes, particularly Meghan, and see them in the wrong and not respecting duty, etc. And the royal family being left in the lurch after they had made Meghan so welcome, and so on and so forth. Anything should have been discussed in private rather than in front of a camera would be their preference. This being the traditional approach whereby the British royal family would then gaslight and have different recollections of what was said or not said, or what was meant, etc. And the British public would have no knowledge of the actual truth, only what the British royal family thought their tabloid press printed as being the truth of that matter. Information given by unknown sources from within the palace. The traditional method used over time, and no way for anyone apart from who was there to challenge it. By going to an independent voice and avenue for transmission, and not have to announce their intentions or the content before any decision, the Sussexes, from now on, have a direct route to whoever they wish to communicate their message. By using an independent route, the Sussexes had and do have an absolute, rock-solid way to get their message out, and not have to rely on UK tabloids' agreed version of events with the palace. By getting the message out, and on camera, not to mention the footage that was not shown, but still being kept, was like taking out an insurance policy and letting the world know that it exists. The British royal family are not used to anyone escaping from the cult set in opulence, and definitely not surviving outside of the locked gates, with no security or funding, and with the added icing on the cake from Harry's family, the details of the 2 Sussex locations, Canada and then in California, were leaked to the tabloid press as part of the invisible contract. This kind of insurance policy is gold, because the genie cannot be put back into the bottle, and all the minds of the global audience who watched it, more than once in some cases, cannot be told what they did not see. No one behind the scenes could gaslight Harry and Meghan about their understanding of any aspect of those conversations and events. It was a masterstroke, and one which many believe ultimately saved their lives, and at the very least reduced the risk of life. Or I should say, reduced the risk to loss of life. All of Harry's life Countless people have written biographies about him and members of his family. Despite them, in theory, having an hour or so with the royal concerned, ultimately the books published contained content that mainly came from the tabloid and an agreement reached on other aspects with the wider family, not Harry or the individuals themselves. In the case of Harry, his books all followed the royal family official line, that he was a troubled teenager and became a man with a range of mental illnesses, which were always written about in a critical way, and endeavoured to show Harry as being weaker for it, and not as strong and well-behaved and understanding of duty like everyone else in that family. He was seen as the bad boy of the family, and when he managed to escape from the clutches of the family and started to build a life for himself and his family, independent of the UK taxpayers and royalty, the press turned on him even more. Once the 12-month review, that only the royal family wanted in the first place, it was evident that the shift in the publicly aired anger was directed at Meghan. Meghan was seen as the one who took the nation's favourite prince away from his duty. To be honest, most of the attention was on Meghan from the beginning, but a fair amount was written about Harry too. But once the family left, you could see that an agreement had been made not to be too critical of the future king's youngest son. It was clear that they had not given up on Harry returning, and the hired hands in the media industry that very clearly had been given their orders started on an obvious campaign to increase the risk to Meghan's life, and that if such a tragedy occurred, Harry would return to the family fold. Since the spring of 2022, a handful of so-called pundits have been on a mission to openly talk about and show their disdain for Meghan, but only express sorrow and disappointment for Harry, who they describe like a broken man who has been led astray by a woman. The man who served in the army for 10 years and who reached the rank of major, but could not use it because it would be higher than his brother's rank, is one of those situations that anywhere else would be seen as ridiculous. A man who knew more about duty than most in the royal family. To think that propaganda delivered by the tabloids since 2016 and continuing today has worked on a nation and its politicians to the point that even if they thought otherwise, the male members of Parliament would be most unlikely to say anything against the official line of the British royal family, spoken and written about by agreement through the tabloid press. Only female MPs signed a petition where over 70 of them, 70 plus, pointed out the treatment of Meghan based on misogyny and racism and called it out for what it was. No male MP commented at all. That says it all about the UK at the moment and those top societal groups. Tabloids continue to each write around 20 articles a day on the Sussexes, all of it guesswork, fantasy, because the Sussexes have nothing to do with UK tabloids and haven't done since March 2020. They are in a powerful position now where they cannot be forced to use the Royal Rota and have to listen to statements and read articles written about them and no say in whether it is fact or fiction. One of the main reasons that both the royal family and the Royal Rota dung beetles, I refuse to call them journalists, are so angry about not having access to the Sussexes is because their income has reduced dramatically, and the only reason it has increased slightly in comparison to what it was when Harry and Meghan were sitting ducks for the tabloids is because of the incitement of hate business model and objective that has grown over the last 6 years. A whole industry has grown up on the back of it, and whilst they are making more money writing about the non-UK tax-funded royals than the money they make from the rest of the royal family, writing an obligatory article maybe once a week, possibly on a good week one a day, that very few read anyway. The tabloids are still losing a massive amount of income. Harry and Meghan are enabling them to put food on the tabloid writers' tables so they are not starving, but they are not living a luxury lifestyle any longer. I always like to quote one royal photographer who is in print in one of the tabloids as stating that in his 30 years taking photos of the British royal family, he earned more money in the 4 years that he was part of the pack covering the royals when it included Harry and Meghan. The photographer concerned is on record as stating that he earned more in those 4 years than all of the 30 years combined working with the royal family as a whole. He no longer works in that category of assignment now, but it gives you some idea of how they all used to live, taking photos and writing articles about a societal family that the nation is told is there by the grace of God, and that they are anointed and to be worshipped and revered. Yet in less than a quarter of that time, the photographer earned more covering the Sussexes than the 30 years combined for the whole of the royal family. They had a new jewel in their metaphoric crown, and they put it away and let the couple know every day they did not deserve that attention the world was giving them, and that they should be less visible, less bright when visible in the case of Meghan, and be the footstool and whipping boy for the older brother and anyone else in the family who needed a distraction story or two written on any given day. Harry was there to fill that void, whether he liked it or not. The British royal family and its media tried to destroy the Sussexes, and then they tried to break them. When that did not work, they targeted Meghan, and they are still doing it now. But because of the few occasions that Sussexes have spoken out publicly about their feelings on one or two things, the establishment has to go about things a little differently to the standard royal playbook, one that has been used over centuries, and whilst modernised slightly, it is nowhere near modern technology now, as they are discovering the hard way most weeks. The standard way to have someone erased from your circle of power or friendships or work-related power circles is to try and destroy the target in any way that one can. If that does not work, the next phase is to destroy their mental health. I will come on to mention how that is not a good look for people who claim to have interest in this area, and some of whom are patrons of mental health charities, and yet here we are deliberately operating in such a way in conjunction with people on the invisible payroll, playing wing positions, trying to steer the targets away from the desired direction of travel. When they fail to destroy, they then try to defame, the aim being that it will adversely portray your character and people won't want to work with you, leading to less income and will force the target home, who will be grateful to live in opulence again and play the game like everyone else. The public will have already been conditioned to believe that is the rightful place to be, and how could one not want to live in opulence that someone else has paid for? After all, it is all about duty, isn't it? Why? Because one family calls one family all of this stress, and at the very basic level, the UK public, or a section of it, have fallen for the hype that the UK population own the royal family because they pay for them. The delusion of people who are financially worse off, income-wise, than they were 15 years ago, and as of current inflation rate, the UK is in minus figures compared to all the other developed nations. I have the stats to show you in the article, and the UK is heading into yet another phase of austerity. And people are already going without food and heat every week. But the mindset has been changed by years and years of propaganda to feel proud that there is a royal family at the helm who live in such decadence that the monarchy represents the UK as being more than okay, and the wealth on display when official banquets are held and jubilee celebrations last for days, and various dignitaries from around the world are wined and dined, and all the hungry and cold people in the UK don't mind, because the official front of house fairy tale is telling the world everything is fine. Meanwhile, the government ministers who agree such policies and the aristocracy who operate in the background in the revolving doors between monarchy and government are not short of food and never sit in cold rooms, and the law of the land protects the societal groups at the top from the odd, publicly declared unrest about being cold and hungry from the societal groups at the middle to last chance saloon section of UK society. The UK has reached the stage now where it manages to convince large swathes of the population that fraternising with convicted sex offenders, as well as suspected sex offenders, offences committed against children in both groups, is not seen as bad as a member of that family marrying a person of colour. Members of the carnival of so-called experts openly stating on camera they would have preferred if Harry had married an English rose type. But seeing that he didn't, it's not because of Meghan's race that she is not popular. All the things that Meghan was criticised for example, style of dress, interaction with the public, writing her own speeches, undertaking public speaking duties, her makeup, one by one now the royals are mirroring the look, and in one case it is like watching the movie Single White Female all over again. And even the reporters now actually refer to the attire of this one individual as being identical to Meghan in terms of the style and the colour and the cut, even down to the footwear. The others are increasingly wearing the styles but choose different colour combinations. So it appears it is only against protocol when the person of colour wears these things. Yep, we understand the game completely. The other important factor is that there is more engagement on online articles when Meghan's name is in the headline next to a photo of Kate. When people click on the article, they are taken to an article that is 99.9% about Kate, but it contains a sentence or two about the matching outfits and how glorious Kate looks. The engagement figures are much lower when it comes to any member of the British royal family in the media if there is no mention of one or both of the Sussexes in the headline. That is part of the perception that sections of the UK public believe that the Sussexes give interviews almost daily to some media source or another. Nothing could be further from the truth. The number of timed Sussexes, together or as individuals, since 2016 remains at single figures, a single figure, in terms of any interviews given to any newspaper. each tabloid far exceeds that total for articles about the Sussexes each day. For a couple who are no longer funded by taxpayers and who stopped communicating with any UK tabloid in March 2020, these average total of 100 articles per day, who every day tabloids write about more than the people, all of the British royal family combined, that the UK does fund with taxes. It is clear to see why the general public feels saturated with ridiculous articles about one or both of the Sussexes every single day. It is a deliberate ploy to cause resentment to grow against the couple, despite their very obvious success outside of the UK and the awards they are being given for their work. And let's not forget that the actual UK tabloids make some money from doing this, more than if they did not write about the Sussexes several times every day. Coercive control and the law. I'm not saying criminal activity in relation to the coerced control is the template for legal response to the type of activity that has been directed at Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex for the past 6 years. What I am saying is that under the basic tenet of human rights legislation, there are many categories of law that run parallel to what is going on with the Sussexes, and where action has been taken against people who are not considered powerful or wealthy. Yet, when it comes to people in powerful positions who have senior professional posts in the business or legal world, or who are considered as influencers in certain areas of business or politics, then the world turns a blind eye until things become so serious, or what was once hidden comes to light, the powers that be are forced to respond in some way, even if it is decades too late for the victims of those activities. When you read about these examples, if you replace partner, ex-partner, spouse, etc., with all those groups of people who have abused the Sussexes, for example, the royal family, the tabloid press, royal reporters, government by their silence are complicit, keyboard warriors, Meghan's father and his adult children, they are behaving like an ex-partner who refuses to accept that the marriage is over, and are dangerously obsessed with pursuing them and putting their lives at risk because they have dehumanized their targets, all for the love of a paycheck from media sources. If, on the rare occasion, the abusers are powerful and or wealthy, and their victims are in a similar category, there seems to be a position taken that say to anyone caring to watch that it is best to let them sort it out between themselves. No need for anyone else to be interested. It is just rich folk doing their thing. If the victim is a person of colour, then it seems it matters even less. The view seems to be the victim has the financial means to pay for multiple legal actions and can move home several times in order to try and remain safe, and can afford to pay for top-class security teams. Everyone knows deep down, if the perpetrators were people of colour, it rarely takes decades for legal action to step in. If the victims are poor Caucasians and their abusers are wealthy and powerful, no one is interested until the abusers have long since passed on. The basic aspect of everyone is entitled to protection under the law seems to be pushed to one side. The danger with that is that victims are left to suffer, and if the abuse continues for years, the cost to the individuals concerned is more than financial, and therefore the damage to the authorities and the countries concerned is not easily repaired. As one CEO of Refuge, Sandra Hawley, said, "Abusive men are just as likely to be lawyers accountants and judges, as they are to be unemployed. It is about power and control. I regard the treatment of Meghan and Harry, Meghan in particular, like that of a person in a violent marriage. The abuser continually trying to erode the self-esteem of their victim and telling them how they could be nothing and would be nothing without them, and to put fear in their minds about leaving. When that victim manages to escape, the abuser then goes on the defensive, trying to justify their actions and ultimately try to make life so difficult outside of the marital home that the victim returns and becomes compliant, and in fact, inevitably, the level of abuse is worse than before. Coercive control and how it can apply to describing what has been and continues to be done against Harry and Meghan. Experts have thus often used the non-injury model of coercive control to explain the dynamics of intimate partner violence. The term was first popularised in 2007 by the work of Dr. Evan Stark, who described coercive control as a pattern through which abusive partners, typically males, employ combinations of violence, intimidation, isolation, humiliation, and control. I list reference material and websites at the end of the article to help anyone on a journey of discovery about these topics and more. Post-separation control is a form of abuse that male ex-partners uses to maintain power and control over a woman long after the marriage relationship is over. Gender can be either here. Think of all the groups I have mentioned, particularly the royal family and its partners in the media, behaving as though they are trying to keep control over what Harry and Meghan do in life, still desperately trying to cling on to power over their actions. The royal family never once anticipated that Harry would leave with his family. The aim was clearly to destroy Meghan in any way that it panned out, and if she remained alive, she would get up and walk away. No one thought that Harry would leave too. Prince Charles, as he was then, was willing to place his own son in danger by giving away details of their location in Canada and again in California in an effort to force him home and to secure more years for the monarchy. They would never risk the life to the heir of the throne, but the spare was expendable. What a family. The irony of a black man from an industry that the UK constantly malign as of no importance. The same for the British royal family, who look down on people in the acting profession and is on camera for saying it. Likewise, their communication staff. Step forward. This black man from the industry that they look down upon stepped forward and provided security and a home for the Sussexes and a plane to collect them, to take them from Canada and take them to the LA property, is not wasted on sensible people. Gives me joy every time I think about it. God bless Tyler Perry, an angel walking this earth. Often, when the abuser is in a position of power, like the monarchy, like the police, like the legal profession, like the government, the abuse is not physical, not least because of the potential for reputational damage. The control is often psychological and emotional terrorism, which is harder to prove. One example, control tactics using the legal system to repeatedly drag women through expensive litigation, or launching a defamation campaign in an attempt to silence or discredit the victim and to preserve the reputation of the abusers. Think here of Meghan and her treatment by the royal family and the media in particular. All of those tricks and tactics are clear to see when you stand back and make comparisons, and with these proven academic models I am quoting and what has been happening to the Sussexes, there is civil and criminal law already in place to deal with coercive control. And with my non-legal mind, I fail to see how it can be too far a step to take to apply the law after 6 years of abusive activity in various forms. Never forget that Meghan had suicidal thoughts when she was pregnant with Archie. We nearly had a second questionable death in the royal family under very questionable circumstances, and with clear evidence of various strands of activity which was put in place to drive Meghan out of the family by any means. Stonewalling, gaslighting and threats of legal action are all part of an abuser's repertoire. They employ these and other tactics to retain power and control to ensure that you are prevented from exposing them. Think here of the royal family and the media. Remember their behaviour before the Oprah interview ever came out, and they are doing the same now about a book that is not going to be published until January the 10th, 2023. Only people who are guilty of less than good behaviour would be worried about a TV interview that was yet to air or a book that is yet to be published. The two groups doing the most protesting, hiding behind other labels, are the family and its media. Speaks volumes to me and is all part of trying to desperately cling onto the control and the narrative, using a decades-old playbook which is no match for the astute minds of the Sussexes, exhausting as it must be for Harry and Meghan. I repeat, what are legal minds doing? What has to occur for a trigger to move to action mode? A quote from Women's Aid. Controlling behaviour is designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them, depriving them of their independence, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Think of how Meghan was asked to make herself less visible. Think here how Meghan was asked to be 50% of herself. Think here how Meghan's passport and ID, credit cards, car keys, etc. were kept by HR, which meant she would have to ask for them if needed. They would know her every move. Name removed from Archie's birth certificate, only the title remains. Harry's full name and title is there. All other royal wives have their name and title on their children's birth certificates. Only Meghan has hers removed. Meghan stayed in Frogmore Cottage once for 40 days without leaving it once, and still someone commented that she appeared too soon. Coercive control creates invisible chains and a sense of fear that pervades all elements of a victim's life. It works to limit their human rights by depriving them of their liberty and reducing their ability for action. Experts like Evan Stark liken coercive control to being taken hostage. As he says, the victim becomes captive in an unreal world created by the abuser, entrapped in a world of confusion, contradiction and fear. Looking at a number of websites of experts in this field, I can see a number of experiences of things that have been done that we know of to Meghan whilst on UK soil and Canada, and now in the Sussexes' home in Montecito. All references, as I said, are listed at the end of the article. If you look at the situation when Meghan married into the royal family in the UK, there was no financial provision made for her, none. Harry was told that maybe Meghan should return to acting to bring in an income. Meghan was sent on various royal assignments, including taking on patronages, and more than delivered in each one. travelled abroad whilst heavily pregnant with Archie at one point, and all done whilst paying for her own attire and people to help with that. Through most of the time, she did not have stylists on hand either, other than her friend Jessica. Media continued to report on the cost of her clothing, implying that taxpayers' money was footing the bill, while knowing all the time that Meghan was paying for everything herself. Meghan commissioned clothes and footwear from designers in the countries she visited, all at her own expense. Yet when she needed medical intervention, the royal family refused, stating that she was not an employee, and that apart from anything else, it would look bad on the royal family. Really? It seems it was not deemed that Meghan was family either, because I am certain all other members of the family would have access to any kind of medical intervention. As it was, a friend of Princess Diana was contacted by the Spencer family, who assisted Meghan with help. I sincerely hope that Harry does talk about the impact of the abuse behind the gilded gates on his wife and family in his memoir, published in January next year. I doubt he will say very much about family members, but I am hopeful there will be a time in the future that he talks about acts and the complicity of a number of organisations and individuals in the now obvious effort to prevent the marriage of the Sussexes, and then, having failed at that, went out of their way to try and destroy Meghan's character, and when that failed, went out of their way to try and destroy her mental health. I do, however, want him to talk about the severe and traumatic impact of the cruelty of actions by the royal family, usually by using other vessels to carry out the deeds. Actions which continue now on USA soil by perpetrators based elsewhere. Not to mention the abject cruelty around the creation of spares in the royal family in the first place, and the child protection services needed around that whole ideology. Royal reporters usually were the ones who wrote and have written several books on members of the royal family, and there was no fuss or outrage until Harry decided to write one. His crime? He did not ask any of the royal reporter cabal to write it for him. No income for them, but freedom of expression for Harry, who is no longer a senior working royal. All the proceeds from the book are going to Sussex charities. We must not forget that the Sussexes offered to work for the monarchy for 50% of the time for free. That offer was turned down, so here we are, with the Sussexes already global icons, with a foundation which has secured huge financial deals and in doing so has allowed Harry and Meghan to have self-financing income streams, as well as set up and fund a wide range of charities. Not charities, funding a wide range of humanitarian projects around the world, all in their first year of independence. It is safe to say that their success has not gone down well, as all of the key abusers wanted the Sussexes, well, Harry at least, begging to be let back into the fold, as opposed to residing in a tent under a bridge somewhere. The Sussexes are living proof, Diana was not so fortunate, of what happens when anyone expresses independent thought. Slave and master mentality is living and breathing within the royal cult that UK taxpayers fund. This has to stop. It is like a bounty has been placed on the heads of USA citizen family, and the world is watching because it involves wealthy people. If it was a wealthy black family doing all of this, it would not still be going on now, 6 years down the line. California now has a coercive control piece of legislation in its books, which was approved in September 2020. Coercive behaviour and the controlling of has been updated in terms of the law right across the board. Section 76 of the Serious Crime Act created a new offence of controlling or coercive behaviour in an intimate or family relationship. To me, that is an important addition. I have always seen coercive control to be more than just between, even if it is the majority of cases, but it is more than between an ex-partner and their former spouse. It very much, to me, applies when a family have not accepted that a marriage of one of their family members has come to an end, and therefore the kind of vendetta that goes on and the treatment is identical to that of an ex-partner who has not accepted that his partner has gone or her partner has gone. To me, it's one and the same. And now the law has caught up with that, and it is saying that. So to me, there is even more reason now to look at the treatment of the Sussexes, both in the 3 years when Meghan was on UK soil and the USA citizen was treated in that way. That in itself should have required a response from legal people within America. But now that they are based in and residents of California, and California is one of those states that does have a law about coercive control protecting its residents, they now have more than enough evidence that it has continued for almost 3 years, again on American soil this time. It does not matter that the abusers are not physically there all the time, though on occasion there are people from UK media that take themselves off, no doubt on instructions of their employer, to Montecito. But even if they didn't, the online activity that's going on now and how it has spread because of the incitement of hate by one or two individuals, it needs looking at. That's all I'm going to say in terms of the podcast. There is very much more in the article, and there's a lot more that I would only say, like a number of people, to legal professionals. They are the only ones who need to know. I'm not going to be giving any tips to people who don't deserve them. I want to see action taken. 6 years is way beyond a time limit now. And there is a campaign underway, and again, I'm not going to say much about that, but it will reveal itself in the months to come. I'm going to try and bring this podcast to a close. Like I said, there's lots more information that I haven't been able to cover. I've just sort of mentioned headings, but the details are there. So I will say this. A group of us have started a campaign aimed at the international legal community for the updating of the new ways of abusive behaviour spreading via electronic means, and that abusers and their victims need not be in the same town or country to deliver their blows. The incitement of hatred on people of all ages has implications for all countries, not just those who appear as the face of the very obvious network which operates and funds it from a variety of sources and chains that clearly are set up to hide the person at the top of the chain. Enough is enough. Meghan and Harry are part of a much wider group of people who are suffering, and the global community needs to step up or step aside and let others take the reins to tackle these new phenomenons of coordinated and financed groups and the social media platforms and channel owners who are making telephone number profits from inciting hatred and describing it as freedom of speech. It is time for action. Psychological methods are being utilised now which enable abuse to reach most parts of the world, accessible by internet, on foot or air. The laws exist for a reason. International laws exist for a reason. It's gone beyond time now. Get involved with the campaign as the months go by, possibly years. It's not going to be a quick fix. But we are determined that voices that are currently not heard will be heard from different parts of the world, large and small groups, with advocates doing what they can on the ground. It's time now for international forums to step up to the plate or step aside and let others step up to the plate, and let's get this thing moving. And in terms of California, you have 2 high-profile people who have had 6 years of abuse coming their way every day. They're back on your soil now, and it's still happening. I think there should be discussions about why Meghan in particular was not protected on UK soil when this was going on. But she's back home now with her family. Something has to give. It can't just be ordinary people like myself. We're not going to give up, by the way, so we're still going to be there fighting the fight. But all I'm saying is, California, it's your time. We have made contact with various elected members. That's going to be ongoing. But California, let me just forewarn you, get in touch. Something needs to happen, and certainly people in terms of elected officials in California, you have 2 people that are part of what we're looking at, the various groups around the world. So we're hoping that you have something to say about that. That's all from me for this week. Hope you enjoy the article. As I said, it's very long. It's 22 pages, and that's just with a few images, but lots and lots of references, which will take you to many more. This is going to be an ongoing issue, so it will appear probably a couple of times a year. So another 6 months you'll hear about how we're doing on this campaign behind the scenes. But I hope you found it of interest and that it sparks you to go and look for more information. So, as usual, speak to you in the comments, both on Sunday night and throughout the week. So, bye from me, bye from Ivy, bye.